Tractate Shabbat Chapter 1. Mishnah I. There are two acts constituting transfer one of movable things over the dividing line of adjoining premises, based on biblical statutes. The two acts are, however, increased to 4 on the inside and to a like amount on the outside of the premises by the addition of rabbinical statutes. How so? A mendicant stands outside, and the master of a house inside. The mendicant passes his hand into the house, through a window or door, and puts something into the hand of the master, or he takes something out of the master's hand and draws it back toward him. In such a case the mendicant is guilty of transfer, and the master of the house is free. If the master of the house passes his hand outside and puts a thing into the hand of the mendicant, or takes something out of the mendicant's hand and brings it into the house, the master of the house is culpable and the mendicant is free. 2. If the mendicant extends his hand into the house and the master takes something out of it, or puts something into it which is drawn to the outside by the mendicant, they are both free. If the master of the house extends his hand outside and the mendicant takes something out of it, or puts something into it which is drawn to the inside by the master, they are both free. Gemeret, we were taught Shabbat IV. 2. The acts of transfer on the Sabbath are 2 respectively 4. Why is this teaching here specified as 2 respectively 4 on the inside, and 2 respectively 4 on the outside, and there no such specification was made? Said our Papa, here the special subject of treatment is the Sabbath, and the Mishnah enumerated the cases which involve guilt and those which do not involve guilt, while there the principal subject of treatment is a different one, and he mentions only the cases that involve guilt, leaving the cases that do not involve guilt untouched. But the cases that involve guilt are those by which acts of transfer are committed, and such are only 2. Nay, there are 2 acts of transfer from within and 2 from without. But the Mishnah says, Yetziath, which in a literal sense means transfer from within. Said our Rashi, the Tana calls transfer from without by the same term. And for what reason? Because every act of removing a thing from its place is called Yetzia. Said Rabbana, the Mishnah also bears out this sense, for it speaks of Yetziath and immediately illustrates its remark by citing a case from without. This bears it out. Rabba, however, says he, the Tana, speaks about divided premises, whose line of division is crossed, and in this case there are only 2, in each of which there may be 4 acts of transfer. Said our Mathna to obey, are there not 8, even 12, instances of transfer over the line of division? 1. And he rejoined such transfers as involve the obligation of a sin offering are counted, but those that do not involve such an obligation are not counted. They are both free. Was not the act of transfer committed by both? Said our Haya Bar Gamda, the act of removing the thing was committed by the joint efforts of both, and they the rabbis said, it is written in the law, when a person did it 2 i.e., when one person commits the act he is culpable, but when an act is committed by the joint efforts of 2 persons they are both free. Rab questioned Rabbi, if one were laden by his friend with eatables and beverages and carried them outside of the house, how is the law? Is the removing of his body tantamount to the removing of a thing from its place, and therefore he is culpable, or is it not so? Said Rabbi to him, he is culpable. And this case is not like the case of removing his hand. Why so? Because in the latter case, the hand was not at rest, while in the former the body before and after removal was entirely at rest. 1. Said Rabbi Haya to Rab, descendant of nobles. Did I not tell thee that when Rabbi is engaged with a certain tract, ask him not about a subject that is treated in another tract, for he may not have that subject in his mind? And if Rabbi were not a great man thou mightest cause him shame, for he would give thee an answer which might not be right. In this instance, however, he gave thee a correct answer, as we have learned in the following Bore. If one was laden with eatables and beverages while it was yet light on the eve of Sabbath, and he carried them outside after dark, he is culpable, for his case is not like that of removing the hand mentioned above. Abai said, from all that was said above it is certain to me that the hand of a man standing on the street is not treated as public ground. 2. And I also see that, if a man stands on private ground, his hand is not to be treated a minus private ground. Would it be correct, then, to regard the hand as unclaimed ground? If so, would the penalty imposed by the rabbis in such a case, namely that one should not move his hand, containing a movable thing, back during the Sabbath day, apply in this case or not? Come and hear the following Bore. If a man has his hand filled with fruit, and he extends it outside of the premises where he stands, one said he is not permitted to draw it back, and another Bore says he is allowed to do so. May we not assume that this is their point of dispute? The former holds that the hand is treated as unclaimed ground, and the latter thinks that it is not like unclaimed ground. Nay, it may be that both agree that the hand, as spoken of in our Mishnah, is like unclaimed ground, and yet it presents no difficulty. One of the Bore treats of a man who had extended his hand unintentionally, and the other one treats of a man who had put forth his hand intentionally. In the former case the rabbis did not fine him, and in the latter case they did. And if you wish, it may be said that they both speak of a case when the act was done unintentionally, and their point of differing is as to the varying premises, whether the hand may be drawn back to the ground where the man stands, or to other private ground that adjoins it. As Rabbah questioned our Naaman, if the hand of a man was filled with fruit, and he extended it outside, may he draw it back to the same ground where he stands? And he answered, he may. And may he remove his hand to other private ground? Nay. And to the question, what is the distinction? He said, if thou wilt measure a whole cur of salt and present me with it, I shall tell thee the answer. See footnote, Arabin p79. In the former case his design was not accomplished, in the latter, however, his design was accomplished, and it is prohibited for fear that it should be repeated. Our Bibi Barabe questioned, if one has put bread into the oven, is he allowed to take it out before it is baked, and he becomes liable to bring a sin offering, or not? Said Arika Barabe to Rabbana, what does the questioner mean? Unintentionally and without remembering that it is Sabbath, then what does the expression allowed mean? To whom? He is still not aware of it. On the other hand, if he did it unintentionally and afterward he remembered of the Sabbath, How can he be liable to a sin offering? Did not a Mishnah state that the liability to bring such a sacrifice applies only when the failing was begun and accomplished unintentionally? Should it be understood that the act was done intentionally, then it would not involve the liability of a sin offering, but it would constitute a crime that involved capital punishment. 1. Said Arashi, say then, it is a crime that involves capital punishment. Arika, the son of Rabbah, taught so plainly. Our Bibi Barabe said, if one put bread into the oven, he is allowed to take it out before it may involve a case of capital punishment. The mendicant extended his hand, etc. Why is he culpable? To complete the act, there must be a transfer from a place that is 4L square and a depositing into a place of the same area, and such was not the case here. Said Rabbah, our Mishnah is in accordance with our Akiba's opinion, who holds that as soon as the air of a place surrounds a thing, it is equal to the thing being deposited in that place. But may it not be that depositing does not require 4Ls for the reason stated above, but removing does? Said our Joseph, the teaching of this paragraph agrees not with the opinion of our Akiba, but with that of Rabbi, as we have learned in the following Boreka. If one threw an object from one street into the other, and there was a private ground between them, Rabbi declared him culpable, and the sages freed him. Hereupon our Jehuda in the name of Samuel said, Rabbi declared the man guilty of 2 offenses, one for having removed the thing from its place, and one for having deposited it in another place. Hence in both, the 4Ls in question are not required. But with reference to this, it was taught that both Rab and Samuel said that Rabbi's declaration of culpability treated of a case where the private ground that divided the 2 streets was roofed, for the assumption is that a house must be regarded as a solid object that fills out all the space it occupies, but not when it was unroofed. Therefore said Rabbi, all these views can be dispensed with as the hand of a man, because of its value is considered as a piece of ground 4L square. And so, also was declared by Rabin when he came from Palestine in the name of our Johanan. Our Abin in the name of our Ilaya, quoting our Johanan, said, if one threw a thing, and it rested in the hands of another man, he is culpable. Why the repetition? Has not our Johanan declared above already that the hand of a man is considered as a space of 4L square? Lest one say that this is only when he intended to put it into his hand, and the intention makes it valuable as the space in question, but not otherwise. Therefore the repetition. The same said again in the name of the same authority, if one remains standing in his place when he receives a thing, he is culpable, but if he was moving away from his place when he received it, he is free. And so also we have learned in a Boritha in the name of the anonymous teachers. Our Johanan asked the following question, if one threw a thing and then moved from his place and caught it, is he culpable or not? How is this question to be understood? Said our Ada Barakba, the difficulty is concerning the exercise of 2 forces by one man, and the question was thus, if 2 forces were exercised by one man in committing a prohibited act, should both parts of the act be accounted to the same so that he should be declared culpable, or should each part of the act be considered separately, as if there were 2 individuals concerned, and then he is free? This question is not decided. Our Abin in the name of our Johanan said, if one put his hand into the yard of his neighbor, got it full of rainwater, and withdrew it, he is guilty. But to make one guilty of the act, it must consist of removing a thing from a place of 4L square, which is not the case here. Said our Hayabi. Arhana, it means that he took the water as it was running down a slanting wall, as Rabbah taught elsewhere that removing a thing from a slanting wall made the man culpable. But in speaking of removing an object from a slanting wall, Rabbah treated on the question of removing a book, which is a stationary thing. Is it analogous to removing water that can never become stationary? Therefore said Rabbah, our case treats when he dipped the water out of a cavity in the wall in question. Is not this self-evident? Lest one say that water standing upon water is not considered stationary, he comes to teach us that it is. And this is in accordance with his theory as follows, water standing upon water is considered stationary, a nut however, lying upon the surface of water is not considered so. The same said again in the name of the same authorities, one who is laden with eatables and beverages, entering and going out the whole day, he is not culpable until he rests. Said Abay, and even then only if he stops for the purpose of resting, but not when he stops merely to adjust his burden on his shoulders. Whence is this deduced? From what the master said, he stopped within the limit of 4Ls to rest, he is free, but if he stopped to adjust the load on his shoulders, he is culpable. Beyond 4Ls, if he stopped to rest, he is culpable, but if he stopped to adjust the burden on his shoulder, he is not culpable. What does this imply? It implies that one cannot be culpable unless his intention of removing was before he stopped. The rabbis taught, if one takes anything from his store into the market through the alleyway where the benches of market men are situated, he is culpable, it makes no difference whether he carries, throws or pushes it with his arm. Ben Azai, however, said, if he carries it in or out he is not culpable, but if he throws or pushes it in or out he is culpable. The same we have learned in another Boreka. The rabbis taught there are 4 kinds of premises as regards the Sabbath, viz. Private ground, public ground, unclaimed ground, and ground that is under no jurisdiction. What is private ground? A ditch or hedge that is 10 spans deep or high and 4 spans wide, such are absolutely private grounds. What is public ground? A country road or a wide street or lanes open at both ends, such are absolutely public grounds. So that in these 2 kinds of premises nothing must be carried from one to the other, and if such was done by one unintentionally he is liable to a sin offering, if however intentionally then he is liable to be cut off, or to suffer the extreme penalty, at the hands of human justice. A sea, a valley of fields, the front walk, before a row of stores and unclaimed ground are neither like public nor like private ground. Nothing should be carried about there to start with, but if one has done it, he is not culpable. Nor should anything be taken out of these grounds into public or private ground, or brought in from the latter into these grounds, but if one has done so he is not culpable. In adjoining courtyards of many tenants and alleys that are open at both ends where the tenants have made it communal property, one carrying things is allowed. However, it is not allowed when such is not done. A man standing on the doorstep may second take things from or give things to the master of the house, so also may he take a thing from a mendicant in the street or give it to him, but he must not take things from the master of the house and hand them over to the mendicant in the street, nor take from the latter and transmit to the former. Still, if this was done, all the three men are not guilty. Anonymous teachers, however, say that the doorstep serves as two separate grounds. When the door is open it belongs to the inside, and when the door is closed it belongs to the outside. But if the doorstep is 10 spans high and 4 spans wide, it is considered as a premises in itself. The master said, such are absolutely private grounds. What does he intend to exclude by this emphatic declaration? To exclude that which our Jehuda taught about Arabin. These are absolutely public grounds. What does it mean to exclude? To exclude another instance of our Jehuda's teaching concerning the enclosure of wells. Why does not the Boré account the desert also? For have we not learned in a Boré that public ground is constituted by public roads, wide streets, alleys that are open at both ends, and the desert? Said Abay, it presents no difficulty. There the law was expounded as it existed when Israel dwelt in the desert. Here, however, the law is taught as it prevails at the present time. The master said, if one has brought in or taken out a thing unintentionally, etc. Is not this self-evident? He means to say that if the culprit did it intentionally, he is liable to be cut off, etc. Also this is self-evident. He comes to teach because of the following statement of Rab, who said, I found mysterious scrolls in the possession of my uncle Arhaya, which read, AC ben Jehuda says, there are 40 less one principal acts of labor. A man, however, cannot be guilty of performing but one. And to the question, how is this to be understood? The answer was, it should be corrected and read, there is one of those acts of labor for which a man is not guilty. In consequence, however, of the omission, just what particular act of labor is excluded, all of the 39 remain doubtful, and the Boré teaches that the labor mentioned is not one of the doubtful. Again, the master said, a sea, a valley of fields, etc. Is that so? Have we not learned to Harod, Vi? 7 that a valley is in summertime to be regarded as private ground with reference to the Sabbath, and as public ground with reference to defilement in the rainy season. However, it is private ground in all respects. Said Ula, as a matter of fact it is unclaimed ground, but by calling it private ground the Boré only means to distinguish it from public ground. Our Ashi, however, said, he speaks of a valley in which there are partitions. 1. And unclaimed ground. Are not all the above mentioned unclaimed ground? When our Dimi came he said in the name of our Johanan the mention of unclaimed ground in this case is required merely to imply a corner of a private plot that adjoins public ground, for although at times when the street is crowded, many people are forced into this corner, it is considered as unclaimed ground as the public use of it is not regarded with favor. He said also in the name of the same authority, the space between the pillars and the buildings, on the side of the street, is considered by the law as unclaimed ground. Why so? Because although many walk there, still since one cannot make his way in such space freely, the row of pillars being irregular or in a broken line, it is like unclaimed ground. Our Zerah in the name of our Jehuda said, the benches in front of pillars are regarded as unclaimed ground, even if they are 10 spans high and 4 spans wide. The one who holds that the space between the pillars is considered as such will so much the more agree that the benches in front of the pillars are considered such, but he who says that the benches are so considered, may hold that this is so because the encroachment upon them is not regarded with favor. The ground between the pillars, however, which is usually trodden by many people, is like public ground. Rabba B. Sheila in the name of Arhista said, if one throw or plaster an adhesible thing against the side of a brick that is standing up in the street, he is culpable, but if he throw or plaster a thing on top of it, he is not. Abay and Rabba both said, provided the brick is 3 spans high so that people do not step upon it, with bushes or briars however, even if less than 3 spans high, one is not culpable. And Haya bar Rab said, even a bush or briar must be 3 spans high. 1. Rabba of the school of our Sheila said when our Dimi came from Palestine, he said in the name of our Johanan, no space can be considered unclaimed ground unless it has an area of 4 spans square, and our Sheshe added that it holds good up to 10 spans square. What does it mean? Shall we assume that only if it has a partition of 10 spans it is unclaimed ground? Has not our Gittel in the name of our Haya bar Joseph, quoting Rab said, a house that is not 10 spans high, but which is raised to that height by the ceiling one may handle on the roof over its entire area, inside of the house however, only within 4 square. Therefore we must say that the statement, it holds good up to 10 spans, implies that the law of unclaimed ground is valid when the height does not exceed 10 spans. As Samuel said to our Jehuda, ingenious scholar, treat not on laws of the Sabbath exceeding 10 spans in height. And to what does it apply? To private ground it could not apply, as it is known that private ground is so considered to the sky, hence it is only to unclaimed ground that above 10 spans does not exist, as the rabbis have invested unclaimed grounds with the lenient regulations pertaining to private ground, viz., if the place have an area of 4 spans square it is unclaimed ground, if it has a lesser area, it is not subservient to any jurisdiction. And with the lenient regulations of public ground, viz., the place is regarded as unclaimed ground only to the height of 10 spans, beyond that it ceases to be unclaimed ground. The text says, in a house the inside of which is not 10 spans high, etc. Said Abay, if however one has cut in an excavation 4 square, so as to complete the height of 10 spans one may handle things freely in the whole house. Why so? Because in such a case the entire space of the house around the excavation would be considered like holes on private ground, and it has been taught that such holes are regarded the same as the private ground itself. As to holes on public ground, Abay said, they are like public ground. Rabba, however, says that they are not. Said Rabba to Abay, according to your theory holes on public ground are to be considered the same as the ground itself. In which respect, then, does this case differ from what our Dimi said above in the name of our Johanan? Let, according to thy opinion, such a corner be considered as a hole in public ground. Nay, the use of the corner is not considered favorable by people, while no one objects to the use of a hole in the street. Arhista said, if a person erected a pole on private ground and threw something at it, if that thing rested on top of the pole and be that pole 100 ells high, the person is culpable, for private ground is absolutely unlimited in height. Shall we assume that Arhista holds in accordance with Rabbi of the following Bore? If one threw a thing in the street, and it rested upon the smallest cornice one of a house, according to Rabbi he is culpable, and the schoolmen say that he is not. Said Abai, in private ground I'll admit the decision of Arhista. The case, however, in which Rabbi and the sages differ was a tree that stands on private ground with its branches reaching out into public ground, and one threw a thing which rested on a branch. Rabbi holds that the branch is part and parcel of the root, but the sages opine that we need not assume such to be the case. Abai said, if one threw a beehive which was 10 spans high, but not 6 spans wide into the street he is culpable. If, however, the beehive was 6 spans wide, he is free because it is considered a piece of private ground in itself. Rabbi, however, said he is not, even if it be less than 6 spans wide. Why so? Because it is impossible for twined reed not to exceed the given height. 2. In case he threw the beehive 3 with its mouth down, even if the hive is a trifle over 7 spans high, he is culpable, but if it is 7.5 spans high he is not. Our Ashi, however, said, he is even if it is 7.5 spans high. Why so? Because the enclosing rim of the beehive is made for the purpose of containing something within and not to be attached to the ground, hence it is not included in the lavud class. 4. Ula said, a post 9 spans high, which stands in the street and people use it to shoulder their burdens on. If one threw a thing and it rested on the top of it, he is culpable. Why so? Because a thing that is less than 3 spans high is stepped upon by many. A thing between 3 and 9 spans high is not used either to step or to shoulder a burden on, but if it is 9 spans high it is surely used to shoulder burdens on. Abai questioned our Joseph, what is the law of a pit of similar depth? Said he, the same as of the post. Rabba, however, said, a pit of similar depth is not governed by the same law. Why so? Because the use, which is made of a thing through compulsion, is not called a customary use. Arita Bar Mathna objected to Rabba from the following Bore, if one intended to keep the Sabbath on public ground and deposited his Arab in a pit less than 10 spans below the ground, his act is valid. If he deposited it more than 10 spans below the ground, his Arab is of no value. Let us see how was the case. If the pit was more than 10 spans deep, and by the saying he deposited it less than 10 spans below the ground is meant that he raised the Arab to a higher place, and by the saying more than 10 spans is meant on the bottom of the pit, then at all events the Arab could not be of any value, as he is in public ground and his Arab is in private. Therefore we must say that the case was of a pit less than 10 spans deep, and nevertheless the Arab is valid. Hence we see that the use of a place through compulsion can at times be considered as customary use. The answer was that the Boretha is according to Rabbi, who says that against things which are prohibited only rabbinically because of rest, Shabbat, no precautionary measures are taken when they are to be done at twilight, and the prescribed time for depositing an Arab is twilight. Therefore, although the use of the pit which was less than 10 spans deep was compulsory, the Arab was nevertheless valid, because respecting twilight the rabbis are not particular. Our Jehuda said, if one moves a bundle of reeds by raising one end and throwing it over, then raising the other end and throwing it over, he is not culpable, unless he lifts the entire bundle off the ground. The master said, a man standing on the doorstep, etc. What is that step? If it is the step of the street, how may he take from the master of the house? Does he not transfer from private ground into public ground? If it is the step of the house, how may he take from the mendicant standing in the street? Does he not transfer from public into private ground? And if it is unclaimed ground, how may he take and give intentionally, since a direct prohibition to that effect exists? Nay, the doorstep is a place concerning which the law has no provision, as for instance it is not 4 spans square. It is said elsewhere by our Dimi in the name of our Johanan that such a thing is not under the jurisdiction. The master said, all 3 are not culpable. Would this not be an objection to Rabbah, who said if one transfer an object in public ground from one to the other limit of 4 spans, even if he moves it over his head, i.e. above 10 spans from the ground, he is culpable. In the above-mentioned case, however, he is not. Anonymous teachers say a doorstep, etc. Is such the case even if there is no side beam to it? Has not our Hama Bar Gorian in the name of Rab said that if it is inside the door and not even 4 spans square, there must still be a side beam to make it a free place? Said our Judah in the name of Rab, here the doorstep of an alley is treated of, the half of which is roofed, and the other half not roofed, and the roofing is toward the inside. In this case, when the door is open it is considered like the inside, when it is closed it is like the outside. Our Ashi, however, said, the case was of a doorstep of a house, but the door was topped by 2 beams, each of which was less than 4 spans wide, and between them the space was less than 3 spans wide, the door itself being in the middle, so that the law of Lavud applies only when the door is open, and not when it is closed. Therefore, when it is open the doorstep is considered as the inside, and when it is closed the doorstep is regarded as the outside. If the doorstep is 10 spans high, etc. This supports the theory of our Isaac Bar Abimi, who said that our Mir used to say, wherever thou findest 2 distinct grounds belonging to the same premises, i.e. to which the law of premises regarding the Sabbath applies equally, like a post in private ground that is 10 spans high and 4 wide, it is prohibited to shoulder a burden on it. As a precautionary measure, enacted by the rabbis for fear that the same would be done with a rock of the same size that may be found in the street, and it is biblically prohibited to shoulder upon it. Mishnah 2. 1 shall not sit down 1 before the hair cutter at the approach of the time for afternoon devotion, 2 before reciting his prayers. Nor shall he enter a bathroom or a tannery, the same is the case with any factory or large business, or sit down to eat, or start pleading a case before a judge. But if he has started, he need not be interrupted. One must quit his work to read Shema, but he need not stop working in order to pray. Gemara, what time of Minoah does the Mishnah mean? Does it mean the high afternoon one time? Why should a man not be allowed, since the day is still young? Does it mean the lesser time, and still hold that, if the man had started the work, he need not discontinue it? Shall this be taken as an objection to the opinion of our Joshua ben Levi, who said when the time of afternoon prayer draws nigh one must not partake of anything before performing his devotion? Nay, he speaks here of the high time, and yet one shall not begin cutting his hair as a precaution against accidents, lest his scissors break, a bath to sweat, lest he grow exhausted, a tannery, lest he notice some damage to his wares and become confused, nor shall he sit down to eat lest the meal be protracted, pleading a case of justice, lest argument be advanced that overrose all previous arguments, and until all this is settled the Minoah prayer will be forgotten. From what moment does the act of hair cutting begin? Said Arabin, from the moment the barber's cloth is spread over him. The act of bathing begins from the moment the coat is pulled off, tanning begins from the moment the working apron is tied around the shoulders, a meal begins from the moment the hands are washed, so said Rab, but our Hanana said, from the moment one takes off his girdle. And they do not differ. Rab spoke of the custom of his country, and our Hanana spoke of the custom of his country. Abay said, according to him who holds that the evening prayer is discretionary, our Babylon colleagues, as soon as they take off their girdle for the meal, they must not be troubled to pray before meal. However, according to him who holds that even this prayer is obligatory, they must be troubled. But is not the afternoon prayer obligatory? By all means, and nevertheless our Mishnah teaches that if he began his meal, he need not be interrupted, to which our Hanana said that the loosening of the girdle is the beginning. In the case of the afternoon prayer, since the time for it is fixed, we assume that the man will hasten and will not fail to pray in time, while for evening prayer, the time for which extends through the entire night, it is feared that he may not hasten and neglect it. Our Sheshe opposed, is it so much trouble to put on one's girdle? Furthermore, cannot one stand up without a girdle and pray? Nay. As it is written, prepare thyself to meet thy God, O Israel. Amos IV. 12, and as Rabbi Arhina used to put on stockings when he stood up to recite prayers, saying, it is written, prepare thyself, etc. Rabba, however, used to throw off his mantle and fold his hands when he prayed, speaking as a slave before his master. Our Ashi said, I have observed our Kahana. In times of trouble he threw off his mantle and folded his hands when he prayed, speaking like a slave before his master. In times of peace he dressed and fitted himself up carefully, saying, it is written, prepare thyself to meet thy God, O Israel. Rabba noticed that our Ham Yuna spent much time at his prayers. Said he, thus they quit eternal life, and busy themselves with transient life. One he, our Ham Yuna, however, got that the time spent in prayer is a thing by itself, and the time devoted to study is also a thing by itself. Our Jeremiah was sitting before our Zerah discussing a halakha. The day was breaking and time for prayer came, and our Jeremiah hastened for the purpose of praying. Said our Zerah to him, when one turneth away his ear so as not to listen to the law, even his prayer becometh an abomination. Prov. XXVA. 9. At what moment does the work of dispensing justice commence? Our Jeremiah and our Jonah, one said, from the moment the judges put on their mantles, the other said, from the moment the litigants begin pleading. And they do not differ. The former speaks of the instance of opening court, the latter of the instance when the court was in session and the judges were engaged in deciding other cases. Up to what time should court be in session? Our Sheshach said, up to meal time. Said our Hama, from what scriptural passage have we this? From happy art thou, O land. When thy king is noble-spirited, and thy princes eat in proper time for strengthening and not for gluttony. Ekal. X. 17, i.e. for the strength of the law and not for indulgence in wine. The rabbis taught the first hour of the day is the time the Lydians eat. The Lydians were cannibals. In the second hour robbers eat. In the third hour rich heirs eat. The fourth hour is eating time for the people in general. In the fifth hour laborers eat. In the sixth hour scholars eat. From the last hour onward eating is like throwing a stone into a barrel, rather injurious than beneficial. Said Abay, this is the case only when one has tasted nothing in the morning, but if he did so it does not matter. Our Ada Baraba said, one may say his prayers in a new bathroom which has not been used. Our Hamuna said, in the name of Ula, one is not permitted to call shalom to another man in a bathroom, for it is written, he called the eternal shalom. Judges Vi. 23. 1. If so, the saying of the word faith should also be prohibited, for it is written, the faithful God do. V. 9. And lest one say so it is, has not Rabba bar Mahasiya said in the name of our Hama bar Gorian, quoting Rab, that faith may be mentioned. In the latter case the name itself is not so designated, as it means as it is translated above. But in the former case it, shalom, is a designation of the name itself. The same says again in the name of the same authority, if one bestows a gift on his friend, he should let him know it, as it is written, to know that I, the Eternal, made you holy. X. XXI. 13. And there is a Borea which states as follows, the Holy One, blessed be he, said unto Moses, I have a good gift in my storehouse, its name is Sabbath, which I wish to bestow on Israel, go and announce it to them. From this our Simeon ben Gamaliel said, one who gives a child some bread should announce it to its mother. How shall he do this? Said Abay, he should put some ointment around its eyes and stain it with dye. Is this so? Has not our Hamabi? Hanana said, he who bestows a gift on his friend need not announce it to him, for it is written, Moses knew not, etc. X. XX. 29. This presents no difficulty. The latter instance represents a thing that is to become known by itself, the former instance treats of a thing that cannot become known by itself. But was not the Sabbath a thing that was to become known? Aye, but the reward for keeping the Sabbath holy, that attends it was not to be known. Our Johanan in the name of our Simeon B. Yahweh said, all the commands that the Holy One, blessed be he, gave unto Israel were given with publicity, excepting the Sabbath, which was given in privacy, for it is written, between me and the children of Israel it is an everlasting sign XXI. 17. If such is the case, the idolaters need not be punished for its sake. The Sabbath was made known, but the additional soul, a new impetus of life, which comes with the Sabbath, was not made known to them. Thus our Simeon B. Lachish said, the Holy One, blessed be he, bestows an additional soul on man on the eve of the Sabbath, and takes it back again when the Sabbath departs. 1. Arhista held in his hand 2 gifts, 2 from the flesh of an ox, and said, I will give this to the man who will tell me some new teaching in the name of Rab. Said Rabba B. Mahasea to him, thus taught Rab, he who bestows a gift on a friend should let him know it. And Arhista gave him the meat. Said the former again, art thou so fond of the teachings of Rab? Aye, he answered. Said he, this is like that which Rab said, a silk garment is precious to the wearer. Rejoined Arhista, did Rab indeed say so? This second thing is even better than the first, if I had other gifts, I would bestow them too. Rabba B. Mahasea in the name of the same said again, one should never show preference for one child above his other children, as for the sake of 2 selas weight of silk, which Jacob bestowed on Joseph in preference to his other sons, the brothers became jealous of Joseph, and the development brought about our ancestors' migration into Egypt. Again he continued, one should always endeavor to seek a dwelling in a city of recent settlement, for the settlement being recent, the sins are few. As it is written, behold, this city is near to flee thereunto, and it is little. General XIX. 20. What does it mean it is near and small? Could not he see this himself? But it means its settlement is recent, and therefore its sins are not many. The same said again, a city whose roofs are higher than that of the synagogue will ultimately be destroyed, as it is written, to raise high the house of our God, etc. Ezra, Ix. 9. However, this refers only to the roofs of the houses, but as to the tops of towers and palaces, it does not concern them. Said Arashi, I have prevented Mahasea from being destroyed, as he had made the prayer house and the college higher than other houses. But was it not destroyed later? Yea, but not for this sin. He also said, 1. It is better to be dependent on an Israelite than on an idolater than on a Persian schoolman 2 than on a scholar than on a widow or an orphan. He also said, rather any sickness than sickness of the bowels, rather any pain than pain of the heart, rather any disorder than a disorder in the head, rather any evil than a bad wife. Again he said, if all the seas were ink, if all the swamps were producing pens, if the whole expanse of the horizon were parchment, and all the men were scribes, the thoughts that fill the void of a ruler's heart could not be written in full. Whence is this deduced? Said Ar-Meshrisha, the heavens as to height and the earth as to depth, and the hearts of kings cannot be fathomed. Prov. XXV. 3. To read Shemeth, etc. Was it not stated before that they need not be interrupted? This sentence applies to study, as we have learned in Aboritha. Scholars that are engaged in studying the law must stop for the reading of Shema, but they need not stop for prayer. Said Ar Johanan, such is the case with men like our Simeon B. Yoai and his colleagues, for learning was their profession, but men like ourselves must stop for prayer also. But have we not learned in Aboritha, as students need not quit their studies for prayer, so they need not stop them for Shema. This applies only to the study of the establishment of leap year, as our Ada B. Abba, and so also the sages of Hagrinia in the name of our Elazar B. Zadok declared, when we were engaged in fixing a leap year at Yavin, we did not quit our work, either for Shema or for prayer. Mishnah 3. A tailor shall not go out with his needle when it is nearly dark on Friday, lest he forget and go out, carrying it about with him after dark, nor a scribe with his pen, nor shall one search for vermin in his garments or read before the lamp light Friday night. Of a verity it is said, an instructor may follow the children when they read, but he shall not read himself, before the lamp light. In a similar manner it is said that one afflicted with gonorrhea should not eat from the same plate with a woman that has the same disease, lest they become accustomed to one another and come to sin. Gemara, a tailor shall not go out, etc. Does not the Mishnah mean when the needle is stuck in the garment? Nay, it treats of the case when the tailor holds it in his hand. Comment here. A tailor shall not go out with the needle sticking in his garment. Does this not treat of the eve of the Sabbath? Nay, it treats of the Sabbath itself. But is there not another Boretha, a tailor shall not go out with the needle sticking in his garment on Friday when it is nearly dark? This was taught according to our Jehuda, who holds that a laborer carrying a thing after the manner of his profession is culpable, as we have learned in the following Tosef. A tailor shall not go out with his needle sticking in his garment, nor a carpenter with his ruler behind his ear, nor a cloth cleaner with the spanning cord behind his ear, nor a weaver with the stuffing cotton behind his ear, nor a dyer with samples around his neck, nor a money changer with the dinar in his ear. If, however, they did so, they are free, though they ought not to start it, so is the decree of our mayor. Our Jehuda, however, says the laborer only, going out, after the manner of his profession is culpable, but not common men. In the school of our Ishmael it was taught, one may go out with the phylacteries on his head at twilight on the eve of Sabbath. Why so? As Rabba B. Arhena said, one must feel the phylacteries on his head at all times, and in consequence he will be reminded, through feeling the phylacteries, that he must remove them before the Sabbath. There is a Boretha, a man must examine his garments on Friday evening, when it is getting dark, to see whether there is anything in them that must not be carried about on the Sabbath. Said Ar Joseph, this is an important ordinance concerning the Sabbath. One shall not search for vermin, etc. Does it mean one shall not search for vermin in the daytime of a Sabbath, lest he destroy any, and he shall not read before a lamp light lest he snuff the wick, or are both ordinances connected with each other so as to make the ordinance prohibiting the snuffing of the wick binding? Comment here. One shall not search for vermin nor read before the lamp light. What can we understand from this Borei, a better than from our Mishnah? Come and hear another Boreitha: one shall not search before the lamplight, also one shall not read before it. These two ordinances are among the other established halakas in the Attic of Hanania B. Haizkua B. Gorian. From this is to be inferred that both cases were prohibited for the same reason that they may entail snuffing the wick. Our Jehuda in the name of Samuel said, one must not try to distinguish even between his own and his wife's garments before the lamplight. Said Rabbi, this is said only for the inhabitants of Mauza 1, but among the dwellers of rural places the garments can easily be distinguished. And even among the inhabitants of Mauza, only the garments of old women cannot easily be distinguished from those of the men, but not of young women. The rabbis taught, one shall not search for vermin in the street out of self-respect. In the same wise, our Jehuda or our Nehemiah taught that one shall not vomit in the street out of self-respect. The rabbis taught, one who searches his garments and finds a louse shall not crack it, but simply rub it with his fingers and throw it away on the Sabbath. Says our Hena, this should also be done even on weekdays out of self-respect. We have learned, our Simeon B. Elazar said, one shall not kill vermin on the Sabbath. So said Beth Shammai. Beth Hillel however allowed this. Our Simeon B. Elazar used also to say, in the name of our Simeon B. Gamaliel, one is not allowed to negotiate marriage engagements for children, nor to engage teachers or artisan masters for children, nor to pay visits of condolence to mourners, nor to visit the sick on the Sabbath. Such is the decree of Beth Shammai. Beth Hillel however allows all this. The rabbis taught, if one comes to visit the sick on the Sabbath, he shall say, it is Sabbath and we are not to cry, but relief is drawing nigh. Our mayor said, one should say, the Sabbath if respected may bring mercy. Rabbi Jehuda said, may the Omnipotent have mercy with thee and toward the sick of Israel. Our Jose said, may the Omnipotent bestow mercy on thee amongst the sick of Israel. Shebna the Jerusalemite, when he entered a sick room on the Sabbath, said, Shalom. On leaving he said to cry, it is Sabbath, nevertheless relief is nigh, as his mercies are great, and rest ye in peace. According to whom is what our Hananiah said, he who has a sick person in the house should include him in his prayers amongst the sick in Israel. It was in accordance with our Jose. Our Hananiah also said that it was with difficulty that the rabbis allowed visits of condolence to be paid to mourners and to visit the sick on a Sabbath. Rabbi B. Hannah said, when I accompanied our Eliezer while visiting the sick, I sometimes heard him say in Hebrew, may the Omnipotent mind thee in peace, and sometimes in Aramaic, may the Merciful remember thee in peace. How could he do this? Did not our Jehuda say, one should never pray for what he needs in the Aramaic language? And also our Johanan, the angels of service do not listen to one's prayer in the Aramaic tongue, for they know not that language. The case of a sick person is different, as Shekinah itself is with him. This will be explained in Tract Nadarin in the proper place. One shall not read before the lamplight. Rabba said, it is the same even if the lamp is placed 2 men's heights from the ground, even 2 stories high, or even if it is on top of 10 houses one above the other. One shall not read, but 2 may. Have we not learned neither 1 nor 2? Said our Elazar, this presents no difficulty. Our Mishnah treats of 2 reading one subject, and there it treats of 2 reading different subjects. Said our Hena, around the hearth fire even 10 persons shall not read together. Rabba, however, said, a prominent man may read, as he would not degrade himself by stirring the fire. An objection was raised from the following: one should not read before a lamp light, lest he snuff the wick. Said our Ishmael B. Elisha, I will read and not snuff it. Once he actually read, and was tempted to snuff the wick. And he exclaimed, how great is the saying of the sages, that one should not read before a lamp light. Our Nathan said, he actually snuffed the wick and noted in his diary, I Ishmael B. Elisha have read before the lamp on Sabbath, and have snuffed the wick. When the holy temple shall be rebuilt, I will bring a fat sin offering. Said our Aba, with our Ishmael B. Elisha, it is different, for while studying the law he always considered himself common. There is one Boretha, a servant may examine cups and dishes to see if they are clean before the lamp, and another that he may not. This presents no difficulty. The former treats of a servant in permanent engagement, one the latter of one who performs occasional service. And if you wish, it may be said that both Bore is applied to a permanent servant, the latter in the case of a lamp which is fed with oil, the former in the case where it is fed with naphtha. Naphtha emits a bad odor, he will therefore not be tempted to touch it. The schoolman propounded a question, may a servant that is not permanently engaged examine his utensils before a lamp fed with oil? Said Rab, the rule is laid down that he may, but we do not practice it. Our Jeremiah B. Aba however said, so is the rule, and so we practice. Once our Jeremiah B. Aba took his Friday night meal at the house of our Assi. His servant, our Jeremiah's retainer, who was at the time doing occasional service in our Assi's house, proceeded to examine the dishes before the lamp. Said the wife of our Assi to her husband, you, my master, do not approve of this. Let him be, answered our Assi, he acts according to the opinion of his master. Of a verity they said, an instructor, etc. Was it not said, he may see? For what purpose should he do this but to read? Nay, he should see in order to watch the sequence of paragraphs. So also said Rabbi B. Samuel, he may arrange the sequence of paragraphs. Consequently, may he not read the paragraphs through? Would this not oppose the statement of our Simeon B. Gamaliel, who said, children in their rabbi's house used to arrange their paragraphs and read before the lamplight? With children the case is different, out of fear for their master they will not be led to adjust. Mishnah IV, and these are some of the regulations enacted in the attic of Hananiah B. Haizkua B. Gorian when the rabbis came to visit him. They called the roll and found that the disciples of Shammai were more numerous than those of Hillel, and they enforced 18 regulations on that day. Gemara said, Obey to our Joseph. Does the expression and these, etc., refer to the things that were mentioned, or is these used with reference to things to be mentioned farther on? Comment here. One shall not search for vermin or read before a lamp light, and these are some of the regulations, etc. From this it is obvious that, and these is the correct version. The rabbis taught the roll of fasts was written by Hananiah b. Hizkiah and his company, for they got with fondness of the troubles, which their race had experienced. Said our Simeon b. Gamaliel, we also think with fondness of the troubles, but what shall we do? If we were to record all the troubles our race has experienced since that time, we would never finish. It may also be said, a fool never feels trouble, or more pointedly, a dead member on a living body feels not the lancet. 1. Mishnah v. The Beth Shammai said, dye material or fodder for animals shall not be put into water on Friday, unless there is still time for them to soak through while it is day. The Beth Hillel, however, permits this. The Beth Shammai prohibits putting bundles of linen thread, to bleach, into the oven unless there is sufficient time left for them to become heated through while it is yet day, or wool into a dye kettle unless there is still time for it to be soaked through the same day. The Beth Hillel permits this. The Beth Shammai says, traps shall not be set for animals and birds or nets for fishes on Friday, unless there is still time for them to be caught before sunset. The Beth Hillel permits this. The Beth Shammai says one shall not sell anything to a Gentile on Friday, or help him load his animal, or help him shoulder a burden unless he, the Gentile, can reach with his load the nearest place while it is yet day. The Beth Hillel permits this. The Beth Shammai says hide shall not be given to a tanner nor clothes to a Gentile washer on a Friday, unless there is still sufficient time left for him, the Gentile, to finish it while it is day. The performance of all these acts of labor heretofore mentioned was permitted by the Beth Hillel on Friday while the sun was still shining. Rabbi Simeon b. Gamaliel said, at my father's house it was the custom to give out white clothes to a Gentile washer 3 days before the Sabbath. Both schools, however, agree that the presses may be put on olives and grapes in the press pits as long as it is still daytime. Gemara, who is the Tana that maintains that putting water on ink constitutes the final work on it? Said our Joseph, it is rabbi of the following Borei, if one put flour in a vessel and another one put water on it, the latter is culpable of the act of kneading, so is the decree of rabbi. Our Jose, however, says that one is not culpable until he needs it. The rabbis taught, at twilight on the eve of Sabbath one may make an opening in a spring, so that the water run into the garden the whole day of the Sabbath. He may also put smoking incense underneath garments, so that they hold the fragrance the whole day. It is also allowed to put burning sulfur under enameled vessels, so that its smoke work on the paints the whole Sabbath day. It is also allowed for one to put a balm on the eye and a plaster on a wound, so that the healing process continue throughout the Sabbath. It is prohibited, however, to put grain into a water mill, unless there is yet enough daytime left for it to be ground. Why so? Said our Joseph, because one is obliged to give rest even to tools on Sabbath. Now since it was said that the resting of tools is obligatory according to the decision of the Beth Hillel, why did they permit putting sulfur and incense to smoke, or linen thread to bleach during the Sabbath? Because no act was being done, and the tools were practically at rest. But do not traps set for animals, birds, and nets for fishes work. Why then did they allow these? Here too, they treated only of fishers' rods and traps, which do no work, but into which animals work themselves. Now as our Asha has declared in the name of our Asi that only the Beth Shammai holds that there is a biblical obligation for the resting of tools, but not the Beth Hillel, all the acts enumerated above are permitted by the latter, even in the event of the tools performing work. Who is the Tana of what the rabbis taught anonymously as follows, a woman shall not put dried lentils and peas into the oven on Friday when it is getting dark and leave them there to get soft, and if she needs them for after the Sabbath she shall not use them, unless she waits the length of time required to cook them afresh. In the same wise a baker shall not put a vessel with water in the oven on Friday when it is getting dark, and if he needs the hot water for after the Sabbath, he shall not use it, unless he waits the length of time it would require to boil it afresh. Shall we assume that this is in accordance with the Beth Shammai, but not with Beth Hillel? It may also be in accordance with the Beth Hillel, as the prohibitions were made as precautionary measures lest one stir the coals. If such is the case, the burning of incense and sulfur, as mentioned in our Mishnah, should also be prohibited for the same reason. There is to be feared that the coals might be stirred, while here is no fear of that, as when the coals are stirred smoke may arise and injure the enamel or the garments. In the case of the linen thread also no precautionary measure was necessary, because the draft caused by the admission of air into the oven would prove injurious to the thread, and therefore one would not open the oven to stir the fire. Then let the placing of wool into a dye kettle be prohibited as a precautionary measure. The Mishnah treats of a kettle that stands at some distance from the fire, so says Samuel. Still, the apprehension exists that he may stir the dye. Nay, we speak of a kettle whose cover is sealed with clay. Now that the master said that the prohibitions of the Boritha are only precautionary measures to prevent one from stirring the coals, a cold pot may be put in the oven on Friday when it is getting dark. Why so? Because the victuals in it cannot be used the same evening and he, the cook, will never think of stirring the coals. One shall not sell a thing to a Gentile, etc. The rabbis taught the Beth Shammai said one shall not sell a thing to a Gentile, nor lend it to him nor help him carry it, nor lend him nor present him with any money on Sabbath eve unless there is time enough for the recipient to reach his house before night comes on. The Beth Hillel said, all this may be done, if there is time enough to reach his house at the wall of the city where he lives. Our Akiba, however, says, it is sufficient if there is time enough for the Gentile to leave the house of the Jew. Said our Jose b. Jemhuda, our Akiba contends that his teaching does not contradict that of the Beth Hillel, but merely explains the latter's real intent. The rabbis taught, one may put down eatables on his own grounds for a Gentile on the Sabbath. If the latter takes the eatables and carries them off, he need not prevent him. The rabbis taught, one shall not hire out his tools to a Gentile on Friday, but he may do so on Wednesday or Thursday, even if he knows positively that the Gentile will use them on Sabbath. In the same manner, it is prohibited to transmit a letter by a Gentile on Friday, but it may be sent on Wednesday or Thursday. It was said of our Jose the priest, according to others the pious, that his handwriting was never found in the hands of a Gentile for fear that it might be carried on the Sabbath. The rabbis taught, one shall not send a letter by a Gentile on Friday unless he stipulated a certain sum for the delivery. If such a stipulation was not made, the Beth Shammai says it must not be delivered, unless the messenger has time to reach the house in which it is to be delivered, before sunset. The Beth Hillel, however, maintains, he may do it if the messenger has time to reach the house nearest to the wall of the city where the letter is to be delivered. Was it not taught at first that one shall not send at all? This presents no difficulty. In the first part the case treats of a town which has no post office, in the latter part the Bore speaks of a town which has one. The rabbis taught, one shall not embark on a vessel less than 3 days before the Sabbath. This is the case if one goes to sea on private business, but if he goes for a meritorious act he may do so. He may make a stipulation with the owner of the boat that it shall rest on Sabbath, although he is aware that he will not do so. So is the decree of Rabbi R. Simeon B. Gamaliel, however, maintains that such a stipulation is not necessary. To travel from Tyre to Zidon, a journey of a few hours, one may embark even on Friday. The rabbis taught, siege shall not be laid to Gentile cities less than 3 days before the Sabbath, but when the siege is laid it need not be interrupted. So also Shammai used to say, it is written, until it is brought down Duke. XX 20, i.e., even on a Sabbath day. R. Simeon B. Gamaliel said, etc. There is a Boretha, R. Zadok said, it was the custom at the house of Rabban Gamaliel to give white clothes to the washer 3 days before the Sabbath, but colored clothes even on a Friday. From this we have learned that it is harder to wash white clothes than colored ones. Abai gave colored clothes to the washer and asked, how much wilt thou take for washing them? As much as for white clothes, answered the washer. Said Abai, the rabbis have preceded thee with their declaration that white clothes are harder to wash. Both schools agree, etc. Why did the school of Shammai enforce precautionary measures in all the previous cases, but in the case of wine and oil presses they did not do so? They prohibited the performance of such labor as involves the obligation of a sin offering, if performed unintentionally on the Sabbath, or on a Friday when approaching darkness, but for the putting of pressed beans on grapes or olives which does not involve the obligation of a sin offering even if done on the Sabbath, the precautionary measure was not necessary. From this it may be inferred that work which continues by itself may well be started, late on Friday. One who is the Tana that holds so. Said our Jose, our Ishmael of the Mishnah Ediath 2. 7. Garlic, unripe grapes and green grain stalks which were crushed on Friday while yet day may be put under pressure at sunset, so is the decree of our Ishmael. Our Akiba, however, says, it must not be done. Our Elazar B. Pedagog, however, said that the Tana in question is our Elazar B. Samoa of the following Mishnah, honeycombs that were crushed on Friday shall not be put in the press at sunset, so that the honey run out by itself. Our Elazar, however, permits it. Our Jose B. Hanana has practiced in accordance with the theory of our Ishmael. The oil in the covers of the small oil presses Rab prohibits to handle on the Sabbath. Samuel, however, permits it. The same is the case with reed claw, Rab prohibits and Samuel permits to handle. Covers that are used on board of a vessel to cover the deck Rab prohibits, and Samuel permits the handling of. Our Naaman said, a goat that is kept for its milk, a sheep that is kept for its wool, a hen that is kept for its eggs, an ox that is kept for the plow, and dates that are put up for the market, are prohibited for use at a biblical feast. According to Rab, Samuel, however, said it was permitted. The point of their differing is the law of Muksa, in which our Jehuda and our Simeon differ. It is explained farther on that, according to the latter, no Muksa exists. A disciple in Harda of our just one decided cases according to our Simeon's teaching, and our Hamuna put him under the ban. But have we not adopted the opinion of our Simeon? Yea, but Harda was within the jurisdiction of Rab, and he the disciple should not have done as he did against Rabba's teaching. Mishnah Vi, meats, onions, and eggs shall not be put to roasting on the eve of Sabbath, unless they can be done while it is yet day. Bread shall not be put in the oven or a cake upon live coals, unless the crust can be formed while it is yet day. Our Elazar says it is enough if the bottom crust is formed. The Passover sacrifice may be turned around in the oven on Friday, when it is getting dark. In the heating house of the sanctuary, the fire was fed at eventide. The fires in the rural districts may be fed until the flames envelop the greatest part of the fuel. Our Judha says where coals were already burning more fuel may be added, even when Sabbath is quite near at hand. Gemara, when should such victuals be considered done? Said our Elazar in the name of Rab, when they are done like the victuals of Ben Dristay. 2. As we have learned in Aboretha, Hananiah says all victuals that are done like the victuals of Ben Dristay may be left upon the hearth even if the fire in the hearth is not stirred up and full of ashes. Bread shall not be put, etc. The schoolman propounded a question: does our Elazar speak of the crust that is formed near the wall of the oven, or the crust formed on the side of the loaf, that is turned to the fire? Come and hear. Our Elazar says, it is sufficient if the surface is crusted, which lies close to the wall of the oven. The Passover sacrifice may be turned, etc. Why so? Because a company when preparing a sacrifice in the temple is very cautious. But if this were not the case, would it not be allowed? Has not the master said, a sacrificial kid may be used well done or not well done? Aye, but in that case it is cut in pieces. In our case it could not be cut in pieces. 1. The fire in the heating house, etc. Why so? Whence is this deduced? Said Arhena, it is written x. XXXV. 3. You shall not kindle any fire throughout your habitations upon the Sabbath day. Your habitations excluded the sanctuary. Arhista opposed, if it is so, then they may do so on Sabbath itself. Therefore he explains thus the cited verse excludes only the parts of the members which are already upon the altar, and the reason of our Mishnah is because priests are very careful. In the rural districts, etc. What does the greatest part mean? According to Rab, the greatest part of each piece, and according to Samuel, until no more small wood is needed to make the heat burn. Arhaya taught the following Boritha in support of our Samuel, the flame should continue rising by itself, and not by the assistance of anything else. And to only one log of wood. Until the fire catches most of its thickness, and according to others, the most of its circumference was the decision of Rab. Said our Papa to comply with both views just mentioned it is right that the fire should catch both, the most of its thickness, and the greatest part of its circumference. However, regarding this law to name of the following Bore, a differ. Arhaya says, until it is so burned that it is unfit for any carpenter's work. Arjuta B. Bathira says, until the fire catches both sides. And although this cannot be substantiated by evidence from scripture, there is a hint of this viz, both ends are consumed by the fire and the inside is scorched, is it fit for any work? Easy. XV. 4. It was taught, our Kahana said, reeds, if they are tied together, must have enough daytime on Friday to burn over half, if not tied together, less is sufficient. Granum must have enough time for the fire to catch their greater part, if they are put in a fire pot they need not. Our Joseph taught 4 substances used as fuel, need not have time until the fire catches the greater part viz, pitch, sulfur, cheese and running fats. In Aboritha it was taught that straw and wood, shavings belong to the same category. Our Johanan said that the same is the case with fuel in Babylon. What does it mean? According to our Joseph Hast, and according to Rami B. ABA branches. Appendix. There is a Boritha in addition to the last Mishnah of Chap. X, Ibid P 226 as follows, more than this said our Jehuda, he who has 2 houses, one on each side of public ground, may add to each a beam or a side beam for a sign, and this allows him to carry things from one house into the other. To which the rabbis answered that such an Arab does not suffice for public ground. The reason of our Jehuda's statement is that biblically 2 partitions suffice to turn premises of public ground into private ground, with which the rabbis do not agree. 1. Footnotes. 1 Sejar. XVIA. 21, 28, and Ne. Zui. 19. This Mishnah treats of the prohibition, so strongly inculcated by the prophets, of transferring things over the line of division between various grounds or premises. 1-2 The difference between the violation of the biblical statutes and that of the rabbinical statutes is marked by the prescription of the penalties of sin offerings, shortening of life and capital punishment for the first named violation, while no penalties are attached to a violation of the last named statutes. See Introduction. 2-1 Rashi explains at length how 8 or even 12 instances of transfer could occur, but, not being essential to the subject, we omit the explanation. 2-2 Lev. IV. 27. 3-1 Students of the Talmud will remember that while at the act of walking a man cannot be guilty of the transgression of carrying movable property. The body must be at rest. The removal of a thing by means of the hand implies a disturbance in the rest of the body. 3-2 As illustrated in our Mishnah 4, if he did not deposit the thing that he had passed from the street into the house, he was not culpable. 4-1 All the labors that were performed at the construction of the tabernacle in the desert, as is taught in a Mishnah farther on, if done on the Sabbath intentionally, involved capital punishment. The intention becomes apparent when there are witnesses to warn the perpetrator of his wrong and he does not heed them. 7-1 The technical expression is to make an Arab, i.e. to mix their possessions as if they were partners, as explained in Tract Arabin, I2. 7-2 A doorstep is regarded as ground of which the religious law takes no cognizance. 8-1 According to Rashi, Arashi means to state that even when the capacity of the valley was more than 2 se'ah and no dwelling was near, which is always considered as unclaimed ground in regard to this, nevertheless it is considered as private ground, and whoever carries from it into public ground is guilty. 9-1 Any space that is less than 10 spans high from the ground is considered by the law as unclaimed ground, and their things may be handled on the Sabbath only as above, while on private ground things may be handled freely within the whole area over which it extends. 11-1 The cornice which is spoken of above should be like the branch in this instance. 11-2 The space above 10 spans does not enter within the jurisdiction of public ground. 11-3 Here a beehive is spoken of which is not 6 spans in circumference, i.e., less than 4 spans square. 11-4 There is a law of Mosaic origin determining that every object that is not farther from the ground than 3 spans must be considered lavud, i.e., attached to the ground. In the above case, when a beehive 7 spans or a trifle over 7 spans high is grown to the ground, it does not become positively lavud when within 3 spans from the ground, and is thus considered 10 spans in all. The margin is too small. It must be 7.5 spans high, and when reaching the ground within 3 spans the hive becomes lavud, and being positively over 10 spans high is treated as a piece of private property. 13-1 The reference made here that one should not sit down before the hair cutter near the time for the afternoon prayer is a simple precaution. The exact specification for the time is to be found in Berekith, Parikh IV M1. 13-2 The following discussions may seem to have no direct connection with the ordinances pertaining to the Sabbath, however, they are included in the tract on account of their connection with the succeeding Mishnah, which commences, a tailor shall not go out with his needle when it is nearly dark on Friday. Incidentally, the injunctions concerning the time for the minhah are given, in order that prayer time shall not be forgotten. 14:1 High afternoon. Minnoeth was the time when the regular afternoon sacrifice was offered at the temple, about an hour after midday. The lesser afternoon time was about an hour before sunset. Because the time for afternoon devotion was calculated by the offering of the gift sacrifice, the name of that sacrifice, minnoah, is used by the rabbis as a technical term to designate both the afternoon devotion and the time when it is to be performed. 15:1 The rabbi thus regarded prayer as a thing belonging to transient life because it benefits only the individual. Study, on the other hand, is regarded as an object that concerns eternal life, for by its results future generations may be benefited. 16:1 Translated literally. Leeser, however, translates differently according to the sense, but his translation is not correct. 17:1 Transposed from Tractate, p. 16b. 17:2 He was an Aaronite, and in his time they used to give the Aaronites their meat offerings. In the time of our Hista the descendants of the priests still receive their titles. 18:1 These somewhat abstruse distinctions are made for the reason that a dependent of a scholar, orphan, or widow is liable to incur greater punishment for an injury done his master than were his master an Ishmaelite, Persian, etc. 18:2 The title haber is the exact equivalent of fellowship as a college position in our time. We translated schoolman. 21 Large cities where the men are effeminate and wear garments like the women. 22:1 A servant in permanent engagement is more careful about his dishes for fear that he may lose his position. He is therefore more apt to adjust the wick. 23:1 The Gemara discusses here the 18 precautionary measures which were enacted in the attic referred to, and tried also to find them out, as what they were is not mentioned in the Mishnah at all. As none of them, except the two mentioned in the Mishnah which is not discussed at all, belong to Sabbath, we have omitted the whole discussion. However, we have named all of them in the appendix to this tract, Vol 2 pp. 381-390 q. v, and we have shown that all of these enactments were political and of great necessity at that time. 27:1 Without requiring the labor of man when once started, as is the case with wine and oil presses, in which case the beams once put on grapes or olives force the fluids to run down of their own accord. 28:1 Argus was the man who built the city of Harda, and Arhamuna lived in that city. The cave in which he is buried is still in existence there. So I have found written in an answer of a Gaon. Rashi. 28:2 A notorious highwayman who could never stay in one place long enough to cook his meals, and was wont to do only the third part of cooking they required. 29:1 CX. Z. 946 Where it is explicitly ordained that the paschal lamb should not be dismembered, and no bone should be broken. 31 This bore was omitted in Tract Arabin. Here, however, to render the above-mentioned passage clearer for the reader, we deem it necessary to translate it. Sources: Sacred Texts.